Hey ladies and gents, all right, welcome back to Miss Raga's Art Room. Okay, so we've declared our light source. We've got our light sides of our boxes. We've determined our darks are as close to the direct opposite as we could, and then our middles are what's left behind in between. So now we've got some nice form on those boxes. Let's add some nice form to our spheres. Grab your shading supplies. Make sure you've got a shading guard. If you don't have one of my pre-cut scraps of paper, just grab a sheet of paper towel or some computer paper from home, okay, and rest your hand right on it. Or even scrap paper out of the recycling works great. Make sure you've got your blending tools, right? Q-tips work as great blenders. Remember, we can make a custom blender out of it just by picking a little bit of the extra cotton off and then retwisting. And that way we can have kind of like a fluffy, wider end and a more detailed end. We've got the pointed blending stumps, okay, or the tortillions. And then we also have our chamois cloths. Remember, these are great for blending background areas, cleaning off your blenders, etc. Okay, and make sure, of course, you've got an eraser. If you want to grab a cap eraser from me too, those work great as well. All right, so I'm going to pull up my chair here. And remember, when I'm shading, I want to use my shade guard and rest my hand, okay, on my shade guard as I shade, so that I get the extra cotton out of the way, so that I'm not smudging my beautiful drawing work here. All right, so I'm looking at my light source. I've got light flooding in from the left-hand side, which means this side, the left-hand side of my sphere that's closest to me, is going to be my lightest. So I'm going to start shading with my pencil, and my darkest side will be furthest away from the light source. Now remember, I'm going to use a curved shading stroke. I'm going to shade with the form. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm wrapping that shading around the sphere. Right? If I were to just use a straight shading stroke, think back to 6th, 7th grade art, it would just look like a gradient and it'd still be a flat circle. If I curve the shading stroke, using my heavier pencil pressure further away from the light source, right, lighter pencil pressure as I move towards the light source, letting it fade out to just the white of the paper, right, that gives me the illusion that my objects are really round. Now, when I go to do my blending, it's the same thing, right? I'm going to use my Q-tip, my blending stuff. You could even use the chamois cloth, and I'm going to follow the form, right? I'm not just smearing the pencil around any which way. Blending is part of the drawing process. So I'm blending and curving that blend stroke and shading with the form itself as well. It looks beautiful. Excellent. Okay, now I use kind of a chicken scratch line, so when I shade a lot, so I like to go back and kind of touch up some of my edges of my drawing work when I'm all done, and then there we go. Look at that beautifully rounded sphere. All right, so I'm going to finish shading my remaining 2 other spheres, okay, and then I'll be back with you to start the mannequins next. All right, there we are, 3 nicely shaded spheres. Now what we're going to do is apply what we've learned on shading these spheres, and remember from like our 6th, 7th grade curve shading, right, nice curved blending, to the individual parts of our mannequin. So if you look at our mannequins, the mannequins are also rounded form, affected by the light source. So we're going to treat these individual parts of the mannequin like individual form, as we've done with our spheres. Okay, so I'm going to line my shade guard up here, and I'm going to start with like his little head. And I'm looking at the light source and where the light source is in that picture. Okay, and I'm just curving my shade stroke around the form. Right, kind of imagining how the light source is coming from that direction. And this is where it's tricky, ladies and gents, because again, it's not realistic drawing. We're just trying to create the consistent illusion of form. I absolutely understand that. Oh, pardon me. You know, this box might be blocking some light from hitting this other mannequin shape, and so it wouldn't necessarily be as dark. Remember, or as light, or maybe there might be a shadow there, but remember, you know, this isn't about realistic drawing. This is about understanding this theoretical space we've created. Okay. All right, and so then as I move down to like his little neck oval, I'm gonna do the same thing. Gonna kind of curve my shading stroke with the form. I may switch over to my more detailed blender here at this point. Make sure I'm still on camera. I am. All right. Sometimes I get so focused on my shading, I get off camera. I don't even realize it. Okay. A little additional shade work there. And again, avoid the temptation to re-outline. Do it all with your beautiful shading and blending. That'll make it look most 3D. Okay. And we're following this form of the body. So underside, I have a little bit darker value there. And it kind of curves this way across. If it helps you as you shade, grab one of my mannequins from the classroom. If you don't have a mannequin with you, right, you're doing a little catch-up work at home, just do your best. I understand and I appreciate your efforts outside of class to stay caught up with the work we've been doing in class. Okay, I'm gonna erase my extra little chicken scratch bits there. All right, and notice how I don't go back and I don't outline, but I do go back and I readjust any area where I maybe need to clean up my line work and do some additional shading. And wow, you can really see, I'm getting a sense of that three-dimensional form on the mannequin here. And it's really starting to come to life, to look that 3D. Love it. Okay, and on the underside here. Right, and again, if we were really trying to do this super realistically, I would just set up a still life of mannequins for you with a light source, and we draw them that way, right? But here, it was more about understanding how we can create space without seeing it, without physically being there, and understand how these figures might interact with it. Just cleaning up some of my line work there. And I tend to overblend, so I'm like always going back and touching up my my shading work so that or my blending work with the eraser so that I'm not like losing my light values. I tend to do that. Right, your eraser is as valuable a drawing tool as your pencil and your blender. Again, remember that blender is not for just smearing, but is also for directing that pencil. You can see how I'm treating each individual part of the mannequin form as its own little rounded geo shape, right? I'm not just shading over the whole thing like it's one big piece. I'm giving respect and attention to each individual part of his little mannequin body. Now, one thing I observed on my mannequin was, particularly when I was up close, his hand does have one little flat side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shade my one little flat side dark here, and then I'm gonna leave that other outer edge light with a little bit of shading on the back edge. right? Because this flat side kind of faces the dark side of my light source. I apologize for my coughing, ladies and gents. It is cold season. There we go. Leave that top of his hand light. All right, so we can see there is my little 3D shaded mannequin. All right, I've got a couple more of these guys to do, so I'm going to pause the video again, do a little bit more shading work, and then when we come back to it, we're going to give our mannequins some ground to sit in.